Da 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 da. So the original Guardians of the Galaxy I'm going to talk about first because this is one of those lightning in the bottle moments for Marvel, just as Avenger was. And I'd say, and I use the word lightning in a bottle pretty sparingly. You don't have lightning in a bottle too often when it comes to a movie, but this would be one of those. And it was a very fresh experience, one of those moments in cinema history where people are like, oh my goodness, we're blown away. There was just a thing that you really couldn't recapture a second time. And to just give you an idea, I mean, there were other successful Marvel movies. People generally really liked the original Iron Man, but that wasn't lightning in a bottle. That was just a fairly good original superhero film that kind of opened the doorway for a lot of other pretty good superhero films that met audience expectations. The moment when you really started to exceed expectations was with the Avengers, which people wondered if that was going to be good or not, and once it hit theaters, it just blew up all over pop culture. And another such moment when that happened was later on they had Guardians of the Galaxy, but the question is, can you really repeat these sorts of things? And at least with the Avengers, you really couldn't. The Avengers had they had Age of Ultron, and that was well received. People liked it. It captured the spirit of the original, but it wasn't as fresh, and that was one of the complaints. It did everything the same. It lived up to the same quality, but it just wasn't lightning in a bottle in the same way. But the interesting thing about Guardians of the Galaxy 2, hey there, come on, don't crawl off me. The interesting thing about Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is that I actually do think that this is one of those rare instances where you get lightning in a bottle twice in the same series with a direct sequel from one thing to the next. And I really liked it. I think it was just as fresh as the first one, which is really saying something. I felt just as excited, I had just as much fun, and it didn't feel like I was in for a repeat experience, even though it did mostly everything the same. And I think one of the reasons for that is because the main characters which were introduced in the first one, they really got fleshed out a lot more. And you got to see the character development that you wanted to see. So it felt kind of bigger and better and more exciting in that way, because who doesn't like really decent character development? The only one who didn't really develop much was Drax. He had most of his development actually in the first movie. What are you doing? He had most of his development in the first movie, and so he isn't used as much in this one, but you have more Gamora and more of her story. And oh my goodness, if he crawls into my jacket, I swear I'll feel like I have a chest burster in me. But and surprisingly, even Rocket Raccoon, who seems like a fairly simple character who's just comic relief and meant to make everything zany, as people often said about the first movie, it's just they made a movie about a talking raccoon at a tree that can only say "I am Groot," entertaining, and they sold it. And for the most part, they were just there to be pretty zany in the first movie. But in this, you actually see some character development and some depth to Rocket Raccoon. And although you don't get necessarily character development with Groot, you do have a new side of him. You get to see Baby Groot. You've all seen the trailers. You've all seen how adorable it is. And of course, it works wonderfully with this film. What can I say? I fell in love with Baby Groot. If you ask me which one I love more, do I love Baby Groot more or Adult Groot more? I couldn't answer that question. Both so amazing. I think I would lean a little bit towards Baby Groot. I am excited to see Baby Groot get turned into Teenage Groot, which apparently we'll have in the next movie, and eventually get into Adult Groot again, and all that is going to entertain me like crazy. But Baby Groot is just this genius idea. They somehow make it work. They exercise that idea to death in the opening sequence of the movie, and you have this very great opening sequence. And And finally, you have Star-Lord, who is the main character, and of course he gets the most character development, because when it comes down to it all, he's kind of the main character of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Sort of like Wolverine is kind of the main character of the original three X-Men films. And he's the one that brings the team together, and this definitely does focus on him. It brings up some important story elements that were hinted at in the first movie, and because it brings up these elements that were hinted at in the first movie, it feels like a very natural continuation and a very natural development of the characters, and you also get a very, very good villain. I won't say who he or she is, that wasn't advertised much, but you get a memorable villain. Who this isn't really a spoiler. The villain gets killed off, and I'm a little disappointed by that because Marvel always kills their villains off. But at least this villain was memorable, made an impression on me, and part of that is because the villain does force the characters to develop a little bit. There's also Yondu. Actually, in some ways, this really is his story as well. He's just a side character in the first movie, and he's sort of a side character here, but he really does steal the show. And I was surprised by that. Just like I was really surprised to see how Rocket Raccoon really stole the show. And you see how the movie is also a little bit about his development. And as a matter of fact, the movie kind of ends on Rocket, which I thought was an interesting move. By the way, Rocket, still not convinced that he's an actual raccoon, because obviously I know what an actual raccoon looks like close up, but he's still incredibly just good looking. I mean, obviously, yes, he is good looking, like, dang, if I was a girl, I definitely wants to go on a date with that raccoon, but also good looking, obviously, in the sense that he looks convincing and doesn't pass into the uncanny valley. The final thing I would have commented on this first above anything else, actually. It's kind of my favorite thing about the movie, is that its cinematography is just good. It has some very, very good cinematography for a superhero film. It uses the Red 8K camera, kind of the most advanced camera on the market right now. Shoots very high quality, so high quality that movie projectors can't even project that high of a quality, so it's going to be a while before we see it in true 8K, but eventually I'm sure an 8K Blu-ray will be released and we'll be able to watch that, and I think it'll look great. But in the meantime, with the quality that I had in the movie theater, with the resolution available to me, I thought that the colors were really good. And not only were the colors, the dark values, the shadows were really, really good. And you don't have this much in the Marvel movies. DC has been doing a better job of this, but this movie really kills it when it comes to getting those strong contrasts and those good shadows. And I just admired that so much, and it also got some of these colors. For example, Yondu's arrow, and sometimes it would have a creative interpretation of what outer space would look like, and it had all these creative worlds, and all these worlds really played to the idea that this should be a creative, visually striking and colorful movie. And one of my favorite moments visually is probably this moment with Yondu. He's using his arrow like crazy, like you've never seen him use it before. And it's a very, very great sequence. They use it excellently. I absolutely loved it. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie. And I hope more Marvel movies end up looking like this. And if not, well, this has just sold me on this whole idea that between the writing and just how cleverly written this film is, and also the energy and the color behind the cinematography, that truly only James Gunn can direct the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I'm a little worried that they're not going to be as cool once he gets to Avengers Infinity War. I don't know how the Russo brothers are going to handle them. I hope they take a few notes from James Gunn. I hope James Gunn gives them some advice. I want them to do as well as these movies, but ultimately I think that only James Gunn is like the only director who can truly direct the Guardians of the Galaxy in the way that we love them. And anything else would feel a little underwhelming at this point. There are some other points. I really liked the person who played Aisha. I'm a big fan of Elizabeth Debicki. And Aisha, she's the high priestess of this race called the Sovereign. And the idea is that they grow themselves in pods to be genetically perfect. And who's the ideal person to cast as this high priestess of this genetically perfect race? Well, Elizabeth Debicki, of course. She's a 6 foot tall, actually 6'3", I misspoke, actress from Australia, has this dancer's body. By all accounts, she looks genetically perfect, and so she's well cast for the role. Way to go, Marvel. There's one final thing. The humor is pretty good. This is probably the one area where the film isn't as good as the original movie, because although they actually ramp up the humor to the point where it's actually even more humorous than the original, in my opinion, because it is so humorous, because it makes me laugh so much, that I've noticed that there are fewer lines that I'm actually quoting in this movie than in the original. The original had some really memorable one-liners, and this one overall had some really, really great humor that I really noticed. They really made me laugh. The people in the theater were laughing consistently. It was a fun ride. But if you ask me to quote this movie as it happens, I can't. Not as easily. The one joke that really stands out to me upon second watching, for reasons, is when Rocket Raccoon is making the joke about how one of these days Peter Quill is going to go into his bed and he's going to feel something squishing. It's because he put a turd in it! And Peter Quill says, well, dude, if you poop in my bed, and he says, oh, it won't be my poop, it'll be Drax's. And Drax laughs because it says, I have famously huge turds. Well, I don't know if Drax could actually do much worse than a raccoon. Because speaking from personal experience, raccoon turds are pretty bad. And this little fellow right here has definitely pooped on me without asking for permission and indicating that he would do so. Well, with absolutely no forewarning. I wish you would give some sort of noise off before pooping so that I would know to take him off me, but whatever. Surprisingly emotional film. I'm not going to reveal why, but there is a certain theme, because it was touched upon in the original movie that the Guardians of the Galaxy are a family, and they get into the family theme, and they actually make it a little bit emotional by the end of the movie. And I think this movie ends on a really, really great note. This is a good superhero film that balances together all those emotions that you want out of a superhero film, and also manages to deliver something a little more serious. And I think this is one of the best Marvel superhero films to date. I'm going to give it a 4 stars out of 5. Oh, by the way, this is Rocky. Was initially going to name him Rocket, after you-know-who, but this movie has none other but Sylvester Stallone in it, in a brief cameo appearance, and I really have to give a nod to the great man himself. He's the biggest action star of the 80s, and thought it was a perfect name for a raccoon. Okay, would you look at that? Would you look at that? He pooped on me in the middle of my review. 1 out of 5 stars for Rocky, okay? Bad raccoon.